What is dynamic range and how does it affect your photography? Hello, welcome to iansstudio. I'm Ian Butterfield and welcome to my latest video in my series on available light photography. The first two videos covered shooting in open shade and working with diffusers, and you can find a link to watch those somewhere up there. Now, if you haven't watched them already, I suggest you watch them before going on to this one, which is all about dynamic range. I was asked about dynamic range in one of my Sunday night live streams, and this is the answer that I gave. Okay, what is dynamic range? Well, dynamic range is effectively the number of stops, which is, as a lot of you I know on here will know, are the number of the units of light that a camera can see. Now, let's try and compare this with how the human eye works. And the human eye can see at any one time about 14 or so stops of light, 14 units of light at any one time. But if we take into account the likes of visual purple, you know, the chemical in your eye when it's dark, and the opening of the iris, then if you take that into account, the human eye can see a massive 24 stops of light at any one time. So we can see far more than a camera, because a camera, it's limited to, well, in the film days we always used to say about 5 stops of light. Particularly with slide film, it was really restricted. You couldn't see a huge range in brightnesses, and the shadows were always getting plugged up. These days, with digital cameras, the manufacturers are claiming 12 or more stops of light that the camera can see. I'm not entirely convinced by that claim, because some of it is perhaps only there if you're working with RAW files, and we talked a little bit about RAW files last week, and some of it I think is just purely marketing on there. I would say assume somewhere between the two, between the 5 and the 12 to 14 on there. But that's the sort of figures that we've got. But how does that work and how does that affect our photography? Let's assume that what you're seeing behind me is the full range of brightnesses that are available. And let's assume that the human eye can see this much of it, from the darkest darks through to the brightest brights. So we can see a good range of brightnesses. The camera, on the other hand, can see a lot less. It can see this smaller range. This grey area, this brightness that we see as grey, the camera, if it's done an automatic exposure, will probably render that as black. And at the other end, this lighter grey, it's rendering as white. So it's compressed a small amount of a range of greys to be brightnesses between black and white. So what happens with the colours either side, or the brightnesses either side? Well, anything darker than that, it will record as black, and anything brighter, it will record as white. But we can change, by changing our exposure, we can move which bits of grey we're actually going to record. So if we increase our exposure, and I can't move out of the way on that, what you'll find is the lighter greys now, the lighter grey here is recorded as black, and the brighter grey there is recorded as white, and anything either side again is recorded as black and white. But if we change the exposure the other way, then again these darker greys form that range of black to white, and anything either side is recorded as black or white. So let's look at this look down the line on this. This mid-grey that we see as mid-grey, and if the camera is left to its own devices, will possibly record as mid-grey. But by changing the exposure, that mid-grey can be recorded as black, or it can be recorded as white, because we've only got this limited number of brightnesses that we can record on there. So the question is, have I just proved that black is white and white is black? I don't know. But how does that translate to a photograph? What happens when we're creating an image? Well, let's have a look at this shot. It's a behind the scenes theatre image that I created, and we can see the effect of dynamic range here very clearly. I've exposed the image for the face of the actress in the shot. Now, I was behind the scenes, we were about to go on stage, or she was about to go on stage, and I could see the flats, I could see what was behind there, what was standing behind her, but the camera has recorded all of that almost as pure black because it's outside the dynamic range. The candle that she's holding, on the other hand, it's recorded as pure white. There's no detail in there. I could see the detail, the human eye could see it, but because it's outside the range of stops that the camera can record, that it's come through as pure white on there. So that is what happens with dynamic range. So by moving things around, we get to that. Right, that's a very brief overview of dynamic range. I hope you found that helpful. Our next video in this series on available light photography covers reflectors and working with reflectors and diffusers. And you can find a link to that somewhere up there. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Please like, please comment. It really does help me. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.